And there we go. The chats are being monitored. I believe Mary Jo is doing that. And with that, there's also the raise hand feature for chat. Today, when you speak, if you could use if you're chatting, use the raise hand feature or raise your hand in the chat, and then we'll call on you. You can unmute yourself and chime in at that time. That will help us know who's talking and where you're from. And when you speak out, do tell us your name and your site if you can do that and remember to do that. It's easy for us to forget.
Hey, hey Jesse, I'm already breaking the rules. This is Joyce.
Yes.
Hello. If we're just on a phone, is there a way to raise our hand?
No, I don't think so. It's *6. And if you're just on your phone, go ahead and unmute like you did and say who you are.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So today's objectives. There's 3 of them. They're pretty straightforward. I'm hoping that you guys can understand the design of the new YTP database and how it can help with program improvement. So the flow will be program improvement. We talk about that for a bit. We talk about the cohort model and how it relates to collection of data. Then I'll give you some examples and we'll walk through that. And then near the end, I'll log into the actual database, do a student entry, and give you guys some time to ask some questions around that as well. So you'll see a few slides repeated throughout this PowerPoint. This is one of them, why, from the first Summer Academy. But we're revamping, shifting gears with the new framework as we look forward with our paradigm shift of where we're going, with the big focus and emphasis on students and student engagement and student employment. So it's the why behind the work that we're doing. It's all about the good of the kids and helping them reach the outcomes that they're hopeful to have. This slide is a repeat as well. I know, Mary Jo knows, Terry knows, your TAPS, the management team, we stand together to say, we understand that there's some fears, some concerns, some anxieties perhaps around change. Change is not easy. It's always an unknown for us. We've been in a time of change since March. Schools closing down, not knowing what we're doing tomorrow with COVID. Are we open? Are we not? What does it mean for YTP in our next grant cycle? Why now? That's a concern for everybody. What if I don't meet my benchmarks? We're in a time of rebuilding. So that's where we're going right now. We will be rebuilding. The database will be live. Everybody's going to have the opportunity to input students, and we'll see where we're at near the end of the biennium. You'll be able to address, I know every student counts and here's how they count. We've cleaned up our database to make it easier to read, more user-friendly, and we'll get there. So be patient with us, and we're going to do our best to make this as easy as possible for you guys. Data. I wanted to pop this in just so we know what we're talking about and all have the common definition, just like others have done at the beginning. But data number 1 here says factual information, such as measurements or statistics used as a basis for reasoning, discussion, or calculation. And 2, information in a digital form that can be transmitted or processed. We're talking about both today. We're turning on a database here in about an hour for everybody to be able to use and input students. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Moving into program evaluation and where that takes us. How do we evaluate our own YTP program, and why do we want to do that? And how does the database help us to do so? I'm going to give you guys a chance to shout out some reasons that you think we use program development. So be thinking about that. Feel free to share it out. We'll go from there. But here's 2 reasons that we know we use a database system for, and they can address these reasons. A lot of folks are concerned about the intergovernmental agreement, and they're YTP
Dairy.
very
Dairy.
here.
Oh,
Very.
wait. No.
Okay. So there's two, but what do my YTP team and I need to do to plan workflow? Um, that was addressed very well last week with Mary Jo and Terry on our call. They walked us through, this is a 2-year cycle, and within these 2 years, we need to be inputting these students into YTP. And this is the output of the students towards engagement and employment. But to get there, there's certain steps that we need to do along the way. Maybe it's more screening and referral. Maybe it's more job development, spending X amount of time in job development, talking to people in the community, being away from my desk, getting to know my special ed teachers better so that I understand who a good referral source is, for example. That type of information can be captured within the database in terms of the input or the output. These are the jobs, this is where the student was employed, this is how many hours they're working. Pretty simple. We'll get there. I'll show you guys how to use the system. But moving on, I'd like to hear from a past database user that's out there. There's about 135 of you that have used the old system that has been offline for a little while now. So if somebody would like to speak up, what I'm curious about is, in addition to those other two items, how does the database help you drive decisions within your site?
Nothing in the chat box, and go ahead and unmute yourself, and those of you that have been doing YTP for a long time, go ahead and jump in.
And if you're new, the question for you is, what do you hope the new database can do for you with respect to program development?
This is Marilyn from Malala.
Go ahead.
Okay. It really helps me to make sure, it helps me stay, I guess, on task, on track, so I know where I'm at, because those numbers are always in the back of my head. So it really helps me with that.
Well, thanks.
The workflow planning. Kind of like we mentioned, if this is my number, this is where I need to be by this date in order to reach my target. I see you nodding to that. Yes, thanks for that. If you're new, I know there's some new folks on the call. What might your hope be from the database? Because I know you've never seen it.
Hi, I'm Sammy Beaton. Can you hear me?
We
Yeah.
hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Brand new, haven't seen it. I've heard a lot about it, but I'm really hoping that it will, as Marilyn said, it'll help me track where I've been, you know, and maybe what's working and what's not working, what I need to change to make things work. That's what I'm thinking. That's a little piece of it, I know, but it just seems like it could be a really good system if it was working well, right?
Correct. I hope so. And we'll show you how it works here. Then you can let us know, what could we do to make it even better, right? Does anybody else want to weigh in before we move beyond this one?
I would like to. This is Carol Tappan, and I'm in Grants Pass High School down in Southern Oregon, and I'm brand new. Haven't seen the database. Looking forward to seeing the database. I'm hoping that it will be able to give me some quantitative information for the school to basically not prove, but just show a quantitative, like a successful, like how successful I'm being in the school. So kind of give it that number value to myself and to the services that I'm providing for the students.
I think that's an excellent point, and I know that it can give you that number. I'm going to walk you through some of the reports as well and let you see all of those numbers, who counts, how they count, and in which biennium they count, while
Awesome.
Yeah.
we remember that everybody counts.
So Jesse, can I mention anything?
Let's make it a quick one.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so You know, I'm not a YTP specialist, but I'm involved with the program. I would look at things like, okay, you know, since we have multi schools in the, you know, several schools in the program, you know, kind of seeing how many are coming from each high school to seeing if it's being like evenly distributed, and you know, each school's being represented equally or close to equally. I was looking at, you know, things like what percentage of students were thinking really more of post-secondary training and education as their primary thing after high school versus going straight into work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and then also, and I know it's something that you're addressing is, you know, what percentage of the kids, you know, initially said they were going to do the program, but then kind of ended up dropping out of the program, kind of
Right.
like a
Right.
retention
And
type.
the program and the database that we have developed will address all of those concerns and areas. And it's an excellent point, Larry. One school versus another school when there's multiples in one site
Mhm.
to address from one report, maybe which schools doing a heavier lift perhaps, or for whatever reason didn't have students coming in. It's very valid.
Yeah.
So we'll see that.
One more comment, Garrett Bloom said, it also helps to communicate information with team members using data, which is great.
Wonderful.
All right.
Yeah. So we're hoping that the database can do exactly what you guys just mentioned, uh, as well as it can inform research and development and improvements. And if you remember Garrett's session, number 2, talked about setting the stage with framework and EPCs, the essential program characteristics, and what that means for us within YTP and from within national research. A lot of the national research came out of what was developed prior to it, and that was the YTP footwork that started in 1990. And in the future, we can take this further and develop new research. So that's having the database will allow us to do that. Hopefully, remember one of the whys Michelle talked about was that the program is 30 years old now. We celebrated, and some of the database had not been updated more than one little time about 5 years ago for a system that was nearly 17 years old or more in terms of the functions and the features, and we're trying to bring it to closer to current with the abilities of how we enter data and how it can be manipulated and what we can research. And the last bullet here said, does our YTP data align with post-school outcome data at my site? Wouldn't it be interesting to know if YTP is making a positive change towards having more engagements within PSO 1 year out? We suspect that it does, but hopefully we'll be able to align that and do some research around it in the future. And then lastly, I want to just illustrate this point too. Mirroring the population is as an evaluation tool. When I say mirroring the population, it's pretty straightforward, but what I'm meaning is, does our student base at our school mirror the SPED census within our school? That's, I'm hoping makes sense when I say it that way. But for example, do we serve a proportionate number of male and female students as opposed to the whole general SPED census? Or does our YTP serve only girls, but our whole SPED census includes male and female? Then we're not adequately serving just one. And I believe there might be a comment there
Yeah, there was a comment there.
from Kayleen or Kylene, maybe.
Somebody have a comment?
Nope.
Nope. Okay.
So later on, I'll show you guys how these reports can help us mirror that, and we can look at that data in more detail. So we're ready to shift gears. We've talked about program development. Now we're going to look at what do we actually collect within the YTP database. So for Oregon YTP, we've got a Zoom poll. I'm going to stop talking. Somebody's going to launch the poll here. Select all that apply within the poll launch, and we'll go from there as we learn about what data we collect. Go ahead. We'll give it about a minute.
Can you guys see it?
There it goes. It all of a sudden kicked in.
There we go.
I was like, nobody's doing it. Wow.
About 20 more seconds.
Brenda doesn't see it. I don't, for some reason, she doesn't see it. I wonder why.
Maybe she's on her phone and it's not changing screens. Maybe there's multiple screens and it's hidden behind one of them. I often have trouble finding the correct screen to look at too. But we have about 80% of the people have voted now, and I think that's a pretty accurate representation. So we can go ahead and stop the share. And are you sharing results now? Yeah. Can you guys see the results?
Mm-hmm.
They're being shared, and the number one thing that stood out was student demographic information. And then closely behind that was engagement information at 90%. And then the lowest was the student dream job. So we'll go ahead and close that. So with those results, everything on there we collect. But there's one exception, and that's the dream job. What we in YTP ask is, what is the IPE, the goal area of the individualized plan for employment for the VR plan? What is the student's goal area from that? We don't actually say, tell me the kid's dream job, right? So the dream job might be driving long haul semi-truck driving. You may need to be 21 to do that, but getting a CDL and driving a dump truck, you might be able to do at 18 or in some places. So the job goal might be driving, and the dream job might be big rig driving across the US. But good job on answering that. It was not designed to be a trick question, but rather to just help illustrate what all we do collect. And we'll get into that here a little bit. You see we collect 5 areas: student demographic information, VR information, disability-based information, strengths and barriers information, and then YTP exit and follow-up information. And for student information, that's the demographics. That includes the obvious first and last name, the SSID number, the school of record that the student has their documents kept at, their graded application, the sex the student identifies as, the high school completion certificate at the time of application. So there's a lot of demographics. We'll get into it when I show the actual database. We track VR information. When was the plan written? When did the student sign up with VR, which is actually the date the student becomes a YTP student. And then we follow up their story through VR too. When did they close? When did they become eligible? What kind of goal did they have? How did they close? Strengths and barriers and disability information is collected in its own section. And we'll walk through that in the future here. And then YTP exit and follow-up information. Remember, exit for YTP can occur prior or after VR closure date, and YTP exit is a team decision. So there are circumstances where it's appropriate for YTP to close a file, but VR keep them open. And there's times where VR may close the file, but the transition specialist continues to work with the student and then monitors their engagement maybe and closes the case after 6 months later than when VR did. So to recap, this is a slide that was talked about early on in the sessions, I think with Michelle, or a lot of this came from some of what Michelle laid the groundwork with. But for 30 years, YTP has existed. We've celebrated as much as we could on Zoom. If we were at Summer Academy, we probably had cake again, maybe as big as Peter's sheet cake from a couple years ago when Mike left and we had 4 extra sheet cakes, if anybody remembers that. So we did, for 10 years, there were paper collections. And then there was an old database built in early 2000s. And it was very cumbersome and hard to use, hard to click through. It allowed for errors. So if you put a date in, you couldn't change it. The reports were hard to read. I believe they're a little cleaner now and a little easier to read. They make more sense. The math adds up. You guys will see that. It's important that we can understand the denominator. And in this case, our denominator is always our student base number across the board. So it'll be cleaner data, less errors, and better reports with a more user-friendly version. And I'll be sure to highlight a couple features that I think are pretty slick as far as user-friendly. So it's a time for us to remember that nothing's changing with the intergovernmental agreement, the IGA that sites sign with Voc Rehab. The scope of work does not change for transition specialists, for Voc Rehab counselors. We had stakeholder input in building this database and design. Voc Rehab was on the calls with us. The counselors were on the call with us. Transition specialists have run testing through on this database system. So sites are responsible for serving their student base number each biennium. And the way we count may change some, but remember, every student still counts. So I've got a moment I can take for questions right now if somebody would like or has a burning question before we continue.
Yeah, the chats are
Good deal.
I've been able to answer them, typing on them.
And look at the actual reports, how the data works, kind of go from there. Michelle Markle, is everything good?
Mary Jo was talking and I don't think you could hear her.
Yeah.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
We can hear you, but for some reason you can't hear Mary Jo.
You can't hear me now?
I can, but Jesse can't.
That's weird.
Well, at least I can hear you.
I remember the container that you had.
You can hear me though. Thumbs up if you hear me. Well, I'm glad you can hear me. Yes, I can't hear you. I don't know why.
Wow.
We can make this work.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. I guess we may have to use chat as we go on. So I can see your face, Michelle, nodding there. I'm going to try to watch that for some cues. Mary Jo, you too. I don't know what happened and why I can't hear you. It just cut out, but we're still going. So as we stop and think about the 2-year biennium, these are some changes or potential changes. This looks familiar. It was Michelle's slide from way back. The biennium can be broken down into 2 years, your academic calendar 1 and academic calendar 2. These are your benchmarks that we always talk about. They're listed on every report. You'll see them just like that across every page of every report, and it's fairly straightforward. So next slide. Student outcomes are recorded only in the biennium they started to receive their YTP core services. Based on their application date with VR, that is your start marker. Benchmarks are calculating using a new student base each biennium. Yes, with the denominator always being the student base. There's nothing that prevents you from exceeding that, doing 30 intakes. But what we're looking at is if you do 30 intakes, are you hitting 70% of those intakes? Because that would be the hope. No matter if you exceed it, you're hitting 70. Otherwise, do less and focus more effort, I guess is another way I would say it and give advice to. All right, what does this mean and what does each session teach us? A lot of this from session 1. 100% of each site's student base will be completed by the target date there. So by March of the second year in the biennium, you should have 100% of your student base in application with VR. That means that voc rehab counselors will need to do 25 applications if your student base from your site is 25. That's no different than VR has always done. So they're prepared to proceed with that and work with us as we roll through it. Here we're saying, do you have 70%? Do you have 50% at March 31st of your first year? So we've already passed that. And we're working in between the 50 and the 60% mark because it's not 1/31/2021 yet. But what does that mean? If your student base is 20, do you have half of your kids in IPE by that time, which is 10 students? Is it feasible to say, I need to get 10 students in plan in 13 months time, 15 months time, whatever that is? Yes, it's absolutely feasible. So we wanted to make that easier math, percentage divided against student base. If you guys have any trouble with this when we're all done, you'll be able to sit down with your TAPs one-on-one. We'll Zoom with you. You probably can't actually sit with us right now. Sorry, I wish we could go out to the schools, go out to a site or coffee shop and just chat it out and draw it out. But we are available. We will be having standing Zoom meetings available for drop-in with us, that type of information to connect and help you understand and see and work through the reports. So what does it mean for an engagement? Well, let's define engagement. Engagement for YTP purposes means, is our student working? Or B, are they in a training program post-secondary? And that could be a short-term training program, 6 weeks as a CNA. But hopefully if that's the case, you're going to wait till the student's actually working as a CNA because you're going to be able to help them train through. But it might be that they're doing both. They got a job as a CNA, they're back in training for CNA 2, and you check employment as CNA, and then later on the report, engagement as training because they're advancing within their skills. This is where Larry's question earlier comes into play. We're looking at 70% engagement. 70% of 25 is 18 students or 19 students, whatever the number is. And as such, we know that 6 of those, 19 plus 6 is 25, 6 could potentially fall away. They could move to another state. They could say, I just don't want anything to do with school, with VR, with YTP. They're unengaged. They're not in school and they're not in training. And that's okay. We're looking for a 70% engagement rate. So we know that there will be some attrition. How am I doing? Am I about the right pace for you guys? Yeah, Michelle's nodding. Becky, I see your hand. Okay, thanks, guys. Wish I could hear you.
Can you hear me now, Jesse?
We've talked about exit. We've talked about, we didn't talk about the framework of the PD that Michelle mentioned earlier, the professional development. but we're setting up trainings from this point forward through summer academies, fall regionals, one-on-one site visits to focus on what these shifts mean and how the cohort model affects data collection as well as job duties to support our transition specialists in being as successful as possible. We want you guys to win with this, and we're here to help you through it. We're also saying we understand it. It's strange times. There's COVID going on. It's a rebuilding year. We didn't have the database in effect, but we want you guys to do your best, and we're here to help you do your best. So there's a lot of grace being extended all the way around. Please don't stress on those IGAs, the benchmarks, the numbers. Am I meeting this? Am I not doing enough? That type of thing. I see a big chat just popped in.
Wow.
What about last biennium kids? I'm trying to read it so that I can answer for you. How do we work with last biennium and this future biennium? How does the cohort work count? Things like that. I'm going to hopefully address that question. I believe it was from Eileen Olson, but we'll get there a little bit later, I hope. And if I miss it, we can clarify hopefully at the end.
Yeah, I want to talk and I can't talk to him. Jesse, I wonder if you took your earphones
So same
off.
thing here on the
Hear.
closed rehabilitated site side of things. That means that rural sites we're looking for 40%, urban sites for 50%, big cities greater than, not even big cities necessarily, but greater than, I believe the number was 3,000 students in your catchment area or something. I'd have to look into the IGA to see what it stated, I forget. But that'd be K to 12 across the board, how many kids, right? But if it's 40%, we're talking about 8 kids getting jobs in a biennium if your student base is 20. If your student base is 25, we're looking at 13 kids in a biennium in 2 years' time being closed, rehabilitated with VR, and getting a job. That's a doable number. 13 kids over 2 years is 1 kid basically every 2 months. So to help put that in perspective, every 60 days, are we getting at least 1 person a job? So I believe I covered all of this here on the slide now. The scope of work doesn't change. The IGA agreement doesn't change. The way we count does, and every student still counts. All right. I'm going to try to unplug and replug my mic in and see if that helps, guys. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hear us?
You hear me, but I'm not hearing you. Michelle, can you try to say something?
Hello. Can you hear me? No.
Maybe you need to take your earphones off, Jesse.
I got it now.
Oh, you do?
I've got it. Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Sorry, guys.
One of the things here that, and Eileen's bringing it up, is it's an issue of having the time. And I know that stresses people out, but I think Jesse's going to get to that further down on how you deal with that.
And that'll be like our ongoing training too, is just how to shift when you bring kids on, how you do more teaming, all of that sort of stuff. So.
It is, and that's part of the work that Mary Jo and Terry again laid out last session. I'm not sure, Eileen, if you were on with that, but there's a 2-year graph that they shared on how to plan workflow and backwards plan and go from there. That's part of the time. But within data collection, let's see, we're just about 45 minutes in, so we've got 45 minutes left to run through data entry and then get back to some more Q&A perhaps if it exists for you guys. And I'm sorry that I have to be a talking head the whole time. There's not much opportunity for interaction with this call. We're not at Summer Academy where we could blow it out and do fun stuff, but here we sit. All right, this is the logo that you'll see when you log into the database once you're actually in there. It doesn't look that pretty yet on the first login screen. Hopefully it will, just so we know where we're at. But I want to show you some slides, talk on some specific talking points of measurements, who counts, what a tilde is. Does anybody know where to find the tilde on their keyboard or what it is? Everybody's looking down. That's fun. We're going, what's the tilde? If you look below your escape key on the left, just beside the one, that little squiggly line, some people call it. It's called a tilde. Not everybody, maybe not everybody has it on a keyboard. But anyways, that's where it's at, and it's an important feature that we're going to see on this next slide. So that very bottom point says, the tilde separates prior and current biennium data with a little arrow. Do you guys see that? It's kind of cool. Now we can know last biennium, for example, at MJ Duck High School, 3 students were enrolled into YTP. In this biennium, 1 student was enrolled into YTP. So in 2 years' time, I've served 4 students. And that's how we can address when sites can address when they write to IGA requirements or talk with their TAPs over X time within these last 2 bienniums. This is what we've done. If we add those 2 features together, this is the number we come up with. Still understanding that YTP is asking through this data collection for 100% in application each biennium. So Mary Jo needs to bring in 4 more students to have 5 in this current biennium, which you see on total applications right here. So hopefully these reports are a little clearer to read. As we get into them, I'll show you them in real time. But a site summary report lists the site name and the school name or names if there's multiple schools in one site, such as Larry brought up. And it shows you at a glance the number of students served in each biennium for the data points for each benchmark here. There's more data points that this would collect. I just didn't screenshot them in because I am going to show you in real time as well.
Jesse, Christina Atkinson, or Christine Atkinson, sorry. So, Christine, could you tell us what you didn't get?
I'm not getting what you're saying with the squiggle. So like the previous, is that the previous biennium or, and then the current biennium? Like, I don't get what you're talking about.
Yes. So the little tilde divides between last biennium and this biennium. And that's a great question. It was outlined actually on my next slide speaking notes. But a biennium runs from July 1 of 2019 to June 30th of 2021 for this current grant cycle. And I'll tell you a little bit more on the next slide. Just a second.
So Jesse, the 3 on the left side of the tilde are the active students who came from the previous biennium, and 1 has been signed up in this biennium.
Right. I have another slide that gets into what is an active student.
Okay.
As you're referencing it, Terry. But yes, for this new database launch, biennia, what we would call biennia 1, is kind of strange. And it has to do with If we turned this database on only counting cohorts, we would have lost some students. There are some students that exist within the current build, or the prior past database rather, from 2015 to July 1 or June 30th of 2017. There's about 700 kids that would have gone poof, and transition specialists in your guys' shoes with long-standing sites would have been, where'd my kids go? How come I can't see them? Why can't I update their data? So in our build right now, anything marked as previous biennia is from 7/1/2015 to June 30th, 2019. And that's previous. Current is July 1, 2019 through next year, June 30. So I hope that makes sense. I will also say that we've created a user manual that we will post onto our website if it's not there already. And I'm going to show you guys where to find that. You can read through it. It helps to clarify any of the points we've made today or I've made today that need a little bit more support around it.
Jesse, one thing I want everybody to notice, and I know the fears are there, Alexis Bennett says it's important to spend time screening students before officially doing an intake with Voc Rehab. And that's what Terry and I were really trying to get at last week was you need to get to know the student. You need to do all of those pre-ets and really know that that's, that they're ready for YTP, ready for VR and YTP, because spend that time with screening and with the screening part, and then you will know that you're going to have success. Thanks, Alexis.
Yeah, a work-ready student. And some people might say, well, I may choose to wait to enroll this student into YTP for an extra 3 months so that I know next biennia cohort cycle, I can meet my numbers. Okay, do it, right? There's nothing wrong with that, because then you'll be able to help them within 2 years' time or 3 years' time to get a job. So you'll look at your numbers. We'll work with you as TAPS on helping you figure out that workflow planning, and we'll go with it. So the next slide I want to show you, it follows the same format, but it goes back to what we talked about earlier. Demographics help with program improvement. And remember that program improvement, or the word program evaluation, or anything that's around assessment of the site, is not to be viewed negatively. Program assessment of the site, evaluation of the site, improvement within the site. Improvement means that you're forward thinking enough to be willing to change, and that you're assessing what could be done for better outcomes for kids. It doesn't mean that we're being punitive or anybody's in trouble or that you're not doing your job. When we say evaluation of the site, in general, what we're meaning is, what could we do better? What type of research component could we add to this? Or what kind of teaching component might our transition specialists need in order to help you guys get better outcomes? So I'm hoping that it's not a trigger word for anybody, or that you feel like gotcha is coming, because that's not what we're here for. We're here to support you. And I want to make that as clear as I can. Hopefully I did that, and want to support you. But demographics right here, when you're looking at reports, I need everybody to understand that demographics data cannot be taken from one cohort or one biennia. It needs to come from 2 rolling biennia. Otherwise, if it restarted at 0 on July 1, you would not be able to, for an example here, know if you're mirroring your population and have an adequate number of male, female students served, because it would show, if you had 3 girls, it would show 100% you're serving all females. So you need a larger sample set, which is why it's using 2 biennias worth of data. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. I really wanted to point that out because you see 4 as 100% and you're going, well, that's not out of the student base number. So from the demographic section of the reports, you need to understand that. Moving on, this is the new view for the school summary report. And I'll again show it to you live here if I can. But you can see all the points that it collects on the left: application, eligibility, IP, exit, and engagement, exit 6 and 12 months, as well as how did the student close and what was their completion certificate at exit. That is new. It could be that a student had a modified diploma and they came back as a 5th-year senior, worked really hard, got their 2 credits that they needed, and were able to graduate with a regular diploma. So if that's the case, we want to know it. Same if somebody was just tagged as a dropout and then came back and received a diploma. Because of the work that you're doing, sometimes transition specialists are able to help engage a student enough to motivate them to finish their high school certificate or to get their GED. And that certificate can change over time with some help from you guys. And if it does, we want to celebrate that with you. That's what this allows us to do. All right, looks like you guys are asking questions about biennium dates. So
I think we're good for you to go on, Jesse, unless somebody wants to
I think
ask any comments.
about 30 minutes, 35 minutes left. I guess we should probably keep going. So the school summary report. It's on the next slide, Terry. Here you go, girl. What is total currently active students? So this is a number. And when you click this, this should be highlighted. You could celebrate total active students. This counts the students that are needing some part of their YTP story finished. When we say story, what we mean is anybody that's had a VR intake to a YTP exit through the 12 months of follow-up. Does that make sense? So,
And remember, even if a student goes missing, moves, doesn't want to do YTP anymore, doesn't want VR, you still have to finish that story through the 12-month follow-up. We want that data.
here we go. What I say celebrate, and then I point that little feature at. Remember I talked about more user-friendly features? You can click that list. You can click that and you'll be transferred to your student list. You don't have to change web pages anymore or hit the back arrow and then click on it to go modify the student record. You can go right there and see who's on it. Yeah, and from your student record, you can do the same thing on the next slide. If you click the last name, it'll take you to that actual student's record from the detail list. That this looks familiar to many of you. It's very similar to the detail list in the old database, but it's been brought to a little more current with those hyperlinks. So total active students here are those that have finished their movie, but have not yet completed the biennium. So remember the 2 we saw listed as total active? Right there it is. View the list. This is the list. You see 3 here, but the 2 total active are the ones that don't have a current date in 12 months. So while you see 3 on the list, there's 2 that need their movie completed with IPE dates, closure dates, statuses at, if nothing else, exit 6 months and 12 months. They will only fall off this list and you'll no longer see Duck 3 after the biennia changes, even though their movie is done. So, who's ready? You want to see the database? Do a student entry with me?
Yes.
All right. Let's talk a couple logistics and then we'll get there. Everybody needs to know that the username for the new database is associated with your email address. Your tabs have your email addresses. We need time to input some new users. So we will get that done as soon as this call ends and by Monday at the latest. A feature that some people are going to like, there's no more being locked out. I don't know if anybody's ever been locked out and had to call their TAP and say, I tried 5 times, but I forgot my password, and you're waiting on us to reset that. You guys get to do it now on your own. The system will prompt you, walk you through how to send yourself an email. You enter a password. I'll never know your password. Your other TAPs will never know your password. Pretty simple. And you get to keep going with your data entry. There is one caveat that the system will log you out after 4 hours of you logging in. So know that. The clock doesn't start if you're inactive, it starts at the moment you log in. So if you're in 3 hours and you leave for 2 and you come back and you enter a bunch of data, it may not be there and saved. So remember to log out of your program when you're done using it and log back in afterwards. So it's a security feature that we couldn't control the parameters around, or not very easily. And then that last bullet point is there. Like I mentioned, we're going to get all the new users in. When we enter your email, for example, angela.simpson@k12.junctioncity or whatever your email is, then you will be sent an email and it'll say, congratulations, you've been accepted to log into the database. Please contact Charlotte Alverson if you have any questions. Sorry, Charlotte, that's a glitch that I saw the other day. No time to have the TAPs or that part updated. The message should say, contact your technical assistance provider if you have any issues. So don't pester Charlotte with database questions, not right off especially, but do contact your TAP and give us until Tuesday morning to get all our users in, make sure everybody's up to speed. And then if for some reason we still don't have you on an email list because you're brand new or we didn't have your email address right, you can reach out to us and we will try to make it right and make sure you are in on Tuesday. So we're just asking for a little grace. Thanks for your patience and understanding. More logistics for you. Presently, everybody needs to use Chrome to access the database. Users must know their data on each student section. I'll go through that. But you cannot save an update if you don't have all the fields ready. We've created some videos for you housed on our YTP website under the database tab. So we can show you exactly where to find those and what that'll look like. That tab will be live by the end of the call or the end of the day at the latest. It's going to have our manual on it, which is a posted draft.
It is live.
Okay, the database is ready to be live when we're done with the call in terms of the videos. The manual will be on there in, I believe, a watermarked draft version where there's a couple little points that still need tweaked out of it, but it's there for you to reference. Again, give us grace with that and contact your TAP if you have any questions. And we will have some standing Zoom time available in the next week or 2 to walk through it one-on-one via Zoom. All right, let's see it. Unless there's questions about those last 2 slides.
Lynn Carter talked about, saving, but yeah, when any information is put in, it has to be saved. And if it logs you out and you haven't saved a student, you'll have to go back and re-enter that information. So you always have to save. I think that's about it, unless somebody wants to speak up. Not a lot of questions, so that's good. It's good job, Jesse.
Good. All right, this is loading. Are you seeing an internet page pop up?
Yep.
Good.
Not yet.
Well, no, but it's trying to. That's,
okay.
it should be. It was there.
State computers work for it if we don't use Chrome. Can't you use Chrome, Lynn, with your state computers? And you'll only have a read-only access, so you wouldn't be saving and manipulating things. VRCs would have a read-only access.
Yeah, as well as the
Verify.
teachers.
Yeah, it's not a Google account or being logged into Google. It's just using the Chrome browser, like Safari or like Mozilla or Internet Explorer or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a
Right.
yeah, internet platform.
And if there's within VR, there used to be a rule, and I haven't been in VR for a while, so I can't speak to it, but if there was an exception to need a browser, talk to IT and they will put it on. I had Chrome on mine as a VR counselor in the past. So I'm logging in by clicking the login feature on the right-hand side. I put in my email address and I put in a password. I hit login, and this is the screen you should see with the YTP database up there. I log in. This is the overview that any transition specialist would see. On the right-hand side, you see transition specialist up here by my name. That's my role within the data system. If I were a voc rehab counselor or a teacher or an administrator, and I had access to the database because I needed it to work with my transition specialist, it would say read only right here. And then it would list the sites. So in this case, I have access to see Brookings Harbor, Camas Valley, Central Point, Douglas ESD, and MJ Duck Site. We created duck sites for the purpose of testing the database. So I'm going to log into duck site so as to not to show real data and go from there. So from my dashboard, I click on students or reports as a transition specialist. Mostly transition specialist, but will be here with students. There's my 5 students that I'm working with or have worked with. Some of you guys, when you log in, you will notice that this VR app date right here shows people from 2015. In this case, this student would be what I'm calling Biennia 0. Biennia 0 is prior to that July 15 date, and they don't show up on any of the reports. They're not in any assigned cohort, but it's still a student that needed some kind of story completed at one point. But as you enter kids, this is what you'll see. If you had past data in there, you'll see your past students in here. If you're a brand new user, like many of you are, you won't see students in here, and that's okay. But for illustration purposes, in the next 20 minutes, we'll go to create a new student. And these are the fields that I was talking about. You must know these fields. They're all required. They all have a little red asterisk by it. And then there's one field down here at VR date, VR application date, which is the trigger of when does a student become a YTP candidate or client, and when are they no longer receiving pre-ETs or prior screening and referral type services, but they're an actual YTP client now, is the VR app date. You must know all of these fields in order to save the record. So I urge you guys to get your SSID numbers around from your pre-ETS database or from your school registrar or on an IEP document perhaps, case management documentation that the school has, in order to be able to save these students. So if you go into your student record and don't have it, you're not going to be able to proceed. So has one pre-ETS been delivered? We say yes, because that's a requirement of YTP now. That changed with your IGA last year, that every student that becomes YTP has at least had one pre-ET delivered. Do they have an SSID number? Yes, they do. It's 2020 2000 and number 6. And their name is Duck 6.0. And last name is always Duck in the Duckburg trial system that we have created. You must know their date of birth, and they need to be between ages 14 and 22 or 23. I can't remember without looking.
22.
22, thank you. So we're going to make them 20 years old just by typing it in. 02, 24, 2000. These numbers are really sensitive. You could mess it up, and then the system will give you errors. But to illustrate that point, I'm going to scroll to the bottom of the page where you save the student record. I'm going to click Add New Student. This takes me to the top of the record, and it says, please correct these errors. So if you ever make a mistake doing data entry, you will see which errors and which fields you need to put in. Looks like I forgot to put their gender in. I didn't do their race, and I need to select their diploma status. They first had a GED, and they were housed at MJ Duck High School. The school of residence that you see, that school has a real number associated with it and will help with tying into PSO data at a later point potentially. So that's why that's so important to us. So if you're a user and you don't think your school's right, you talk to your TAP, but I think within the build we have everything pretty buttoned up and know which schools are within what sites. But there's a potential that an error could exist. The graded application, they were a senior, but they said, let's forget it and get a GED. So actually, let's make them a junior that said, I don't want to go through a whole year. I'm just going to get my GED. It's faster. Who's ever heard that? So,
Jesse, I have a question that I think fits in right here. And it's from Tony Davey. And she says, will we have access to all the schools in our district, such as if there is a YTP specialist opening at one of our schools, but another specialist is covering? Will they be able to add data to their site?
potentially, that's a great question for your TAP when the time comes up. Yes, we do have a solution and an answer for that. You may end up with 2 accounts, one at each high school. So your data administrator for the district may have to say, you do this or you do that. If you're an ESD staff email, then you may be able to be assigned to multiple schools with one email address. But talk to your TAP and we'll work through it. So we'll say, so we gave them, this student, we gave them a VR application date of 6/12/19. That puts them in biennium 1, not the current cohort. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes, I'm seeing some heads nod. I'm going to go ahead and give them an eligibility date of, I don't know, 07/12/2019. I'm going to go down and save now. Oops, I have more errors. This field is required. I need to enter their primary disability as addressed by their IEP documents. I forgot that. This field, primary disability, optional on secondary disability, but strengths, barriers, and functional limitations all become forced choices after there is a VR eligibility date put in. I wanted to illustrate that for you guys to know that it's very important to put that information in as you find it. So we'll say this this person has an intellectual disability. What are their strengths? They have great family support, and they have some past work history. What are their barriers? Transportation. Who has transportation issues? They can't get on the bus, or they can't find the bus, or don't know how to use the bus, or there's no bus service in my community. We've heard it all. How do we address it? But transportation might be a barrier. They have great family support, but they have very limited financial resources. And the functional limitations, sometimes interpersonal skills come into play, and sometimes self-direction. Functional limitations, if I put my mouse over any of these question marks, I get a little blue box. Functional limitations come only from the VR counselor here. They will have that information available to them, the VRCs know it, when they do their eligibility date. So here we go. I have now Duck 6.0 in the system. If I go over to reports, I'll show you some of those reports that I was looking at for the sake of time, because we have about 10 minutes, 11 minutes left, 15, 18, whatever it is. I want to be able to illustrate that out. But before I do, were there questions on entering students, Mary Jo?
No, we're good.
Pretty self-explanatory. I highlighted a lot of those, what I call validity checks. If A, then B, and if B, you must have C, D, and E type scenarios here, which actually makes the user database more friendly. It reduces errors. It brings the data current and makes it so we can trust it for research purposes, so that when Charlotte's talking with Lisa at VR and VR is saying, hey, Lisa, how many students have you served? How many with this disability? How many with that disability? Lisa can log in, accurately give a reflection of where YTP is at, and know that the numbers work and make sense. So it brought it to current. We'll look
And
at
it's,
this.
you know, people are seeing, Jesse, that it's similar to the entry's a lot like the old database, just looks different.
It
So
is.
That's a good thing.
It is. We tried to
Thanks,
keep it
Kathy.
as consistent as possible that way. The reports, you can always download your report as a PDF if you're a transition specialist or a read-only user, which goes to one of the first person's comments on the call. I'd like to use my data to show my district where we're at, where we're going, how many students we've served, that type of thing. So that report can be very helpful. Some transition specialists take that report to the school board and they say, hey, look at this. This is our little program. This is what we're doing. This is how we serve our kids. This is why we want you to fund us next year type scenario. So here's the report in live view. You can see everything that I screenshot there, your totals overview. You also get to see the state total. How do I stack up against the whole state? Oh, wow, my site's given 1%. So if you're a really large district with 160 kids, you might end up tying in 5 to 10% of the data against the state total. Some features I did not show through the screenshot, you can compare last year's engagement outcomes from this biennia. Here's the dates that some people were talking about in the chat with last biennium, current biennium. And then again, the demographics, previous and current was 5. It added up to 100%. And then race, ethnicity, strengths, barriers, grades at application, primary and secondary. All of this data can be used with your SPED administrators to help you understand if you're mirroring the SPED census. And it's also the administrators who help give you that data when the IGA was written. If you remember, you say, I'm going to serve X number of kids. This is what our SPED population looks like. We anticipate being able to bring this many into YTP. Here's why. So you can compare it, look at it, see if you actually did that. Look at your VR functional limitations. So another report, go to reports here, is your detail. You've pretty well seen this now. But you see Duck 6.0 showed up with no engagement, no VR closure status, no exit 6 months, 12 months. And you'll always see again your benchmarks across the top of any report you print. Another feature when you print, it doesn't look as pretty as we would like with spacing and things like that, but this header, last, first, gender, grade, etc., does appear on every page when it prints now. And if you've been around a while, you remember going, what column is this and how does it count? At least you get to see the column on every page and the header to know what the column is. Seeing 20 new messages. Are there questions thus far, Mary Jo?
Excuse me. I am answering some of them. You know, some of them it's going back to just real basic stuff. Larry asked, which is a great question. The primary disability is always from your IEP. And the secondary is other things that you may know about the student. That's what you put in. But the transition specialist knows after talking to the teacher or getting to know the student. The eligibility tells you the functional limitations that comes in from your VRC. What else is here that our team is working on a lot of previous biennium students and only have a handful of students from this biennium. For the sake of numbers, let's say we have gotten 5 students total this biennium in plan. Does this mean we have to get another 30 because we have a target of 35 in plan or application by June 30th, 2021? Or do any of my previous biennium students count towards this biennium because this changed midway?
It's a great question. I'd have to read it again to dissect it better, but I believe somewhere in there you said that there was 35 or so was your student base. What is 70% of 35? That's the number that you would be looking for this biennium. So it sounds like 26, 27% need to be in plan by March of next year, in the next 9 months. And hopefully you've already had at least half of your people or more into VR. And we realize again that this is COVID time and VR was shut down their main doors for months. So again, you'll be given a lot of grace. And with that, I think that it's a good time to practice understanding who counts, how this system works, why it counts the way it does, because it'll move us forward to be ready for next biennium when everybody's hopefully, fingers crossed, open and we can be out and a little more normalized in terms of appointments and job development and knocking on doors and getting into businesses and helping kids find their employment. But I think the number you're looking for is probably at least 27% in plan, or 27 kids in plan. So partial yes.
Students already in plan from, oh. Yeah, Gail, I don't know who your technical assistance provider is, but I would talk to them about your situation with your numbers and things. I'm not familiar with ATP site. So
Gail, we can connect after this and make a plan. It's all addressable and adjustable.
Okay,
And-
super. Thank you.
Joe.
And for Larry and others on the call, if you're seeing the screen right now, this is the site summary report where if you had multiple schools, you would see going down this list, each school and how the weight comes into these lines. I don't have it set up that way to illustrate it. I wish I did. But once you guys log in, you'll be able to see that. So that's the database in a nutshell. Let me go back to the PowerPoint, give you a couple links, and then turn you guys loose on it. How would that be?
Jesse, there is a question that says, will our old login work for this one?
I'm answering that. I'm just typing it. That's a good question. I was just going to answer her that way.
I don't think
Go
it
for it,
does
Jess.
anymore, but because your old login was just a username. For example, mine used to be Jay Berkey as part of my university email, and now it's my whole email address, jberkey@uoregon.edu. So in that circumstance, no, my old login would not work. You will all be given new logins. If we had your email address and you're in the system, you may still be in the system, but you may need to update your password by clicking the I forgot button, which I did not illustrate, but it's pretty self-explanatory. It'll ask you twice to put your email address in and then click a button, and then you'll get an email a few minutes later. The emails come in from Lynn Hatfield or lynn.hatfield, something like that, at UOregon. And it's just a kind of a generic email that pops through that says your password can be reset. Click here.
And it comes in really quick. So if you know your email address, give it a try and see if you get that.
So this website that I'm showing is the YTP website, ytp.uoregon.edu. There's 3 tabs or 8 tabs, whatever it is across the top here.
There's one more now. Just so you know, right next to it is one with database resources.
Okay. So there's one more tab. It says resources. Those resources include videos on how to enter students. Terry, Mary Jo, Michelle, they all made videos on understanding and just helping do walkthroughs if you need another reference point. There's a new manual under that resources, or there will be. Talks about everything that I've stated today and probably more. So you log in here, you click that link, and then you'll be prompted to enter your email and your password. If you try it and you're not in the system, it means that your technical assistance provider, your TAP, needs to put your name in. So sometimes it'll say your credentials don't match, which might mean that you're in. And there's another error that pops up if you keep trying that says you don't even have an account, basically. And if you get that, contact your TAP. So there's that. The menu's changing. I just spoke about that. And time-wise, it looks like we have about 5 minutes. What other questions might be out there?
Go ahead and talk up. People are already wanting to talk with people with their TAP. So
I see that.
I have a question. At one point you said, if you're new, you won't see a caseload. So I'm at Clackamas High School. Will I not see what was already in there?
If you're new and have filled into a site that was a prior YTP site,
Yes.
it sounds like that's your case. You will see the students that the past transition specialist did have. We had some new sites.
Okay, good.
We had some new sites that have never seen a database. There were 4 or 5 of them. Couple come to mind. I think they were in Terry's region, Milton Freewater, maybe, for an example, and somewhere else out in that direction. Hermiston? No, not Hermiston.
And I have Douglas ESD. Same.
Yeah, brand new sites won't have any, but if you're a new transition specialist at an existing site, you will have whoever those students you're working with and we're
okay. I thought so. I was just making sure. Thank you.
No.
And Danette, you overachiever, you jumping in and going right away to the database, which we kind of thought would happen.
Yes.
She does say the print is so small I can't see it or read it.
That's a great point. Within the database, we've found that some of the fields are a little small. It has to do more with programming behind the scenes that we couldn't address and the programmers sometimes could not address. However, within Chrome, what I do, and I know some others do, is just enlarge the browser screen. I use control, I hold control and I roll the little wheel on my mouse and take it to about 125%, 130, something like that. And that usually fits a report in the screen very nicely. So I'd encourage you to just play with your magnifier within the browser.
Good. Okay, so Beth asked, so are we to go back and fill in 6-month and 12-month for information?
Yes, that's a very good question that I did not address filling in the student entry. I can go back to it real quick. But let me run through this good of the order first for those that are on the call that need to leave right here at 2:30. Fall regionals are coming up. Watch for emails from your TAP. Watch the website for more information. The first one starts October 5th in Salem. So we have October 5th, October 7th, October 9th, and the following week somewhere on the east side on Tuesday and Thursday, I believe. Plan with your TAP, send them emails to get a Zoom set up to walk through your data entry after you've played with it or if you have questions. If anybody knows that they're retiring, leaving their position, something like that happens during the summer, that you're changing, please let us know. We can help the new user have a transition specialist. It'll also help us plan for workflow, know which admin we need to coordinate with to understand the site dynamics a little bit.
Jesse, I have a really good question from wonderful Kathy Morris, who says, is there a deadline to put all of our new info in?
Well, that's a great question. I'll finish this good of the order and I'll get back to that. So the pre-ETS data, this is separate from YTP data. Pre-ETS data, it needs to be entered by July 2nd. And after this call, Michelle's going to collect email addresses from everybody that has been on one of these 4 sessions, send it out for evaluation, and we'll kind of go from there. The question that Kathy asked, hey, how long do I have to do this? We're saying get it done in the next month if you can, 2 months. By August 15, the database is changing a little bit and there'll be some locks put into place, which will prevent you from entering old data and updating those exit in 6 and 12 months. If I can go back here, launch this really quick. Hopefully it's really quick. This is a screen you'll see on the YTP website when you first go to log in. Say YTP database. Takes you here. You log in. I'm going to go to student duck 5.0 right here and edit that duck. That was duck 3. I misclicked. There we go. Duck 5.0. Down on the bottom is the engagement section. Right now, Kathy Morris and all of you out there, you can edit any of these fields across here. Exit 6 months, engaged at 90 day. 90 days a point I didn't get to. 90 day means at any point in time has a student worked a cumulative 90 days or more. You can't exit, you can't check that box at exit. But within this year, did they work 90 days? So I checked in with Duck 3.0 or 5.0. They were not engaged, but between this time frame and this time frame in the last 6 months, they had worked at least 90 days. So I check this box. And that's an important feature. And what it does is it allows you to receive credit for working with the kid and to be able to document that they have worked for at least 90 days within here. It will also let us potentially tie into PSO research later and say, how can we improve our program to get better outcomes and help you to do so as well? Does that make sense? That's what that 90 day is. That's new. That's the change to this field. The others, these boxes would be grayed out, but still forecast for you. So if this were today's date and this system wasn't locked, You see this just changed to December 25th of 2020. That's when 6 months will happen in the future. And when that 6 months date is 1 week prior to occurring, the system will email you to say, hey, update your data. And then you'll go in and you'll update the student and you'll engage them or not at 6 or 12 months whenever you need to do their follow-up. So that's how those fields are designed to work in the future. Right now, they're all open so that with the past students, you guys can update that and nothing is grayed out below. But if it were grayed out, you can always ask your TAP to look at the record with you and see if there's some changes that they need to help override. So that's how that works. That's what our video that Mary Jo made says. And the deadline to try to get everything caught up is ASAP while you're working this summer with your part-time hours, and by August 15th at the latest. So, all right.
Perfect. I'm getting an amazing, fabulous. Oh, that reminder was really nice from Joshua Gramley. So, oh, they can enter. Yeah, they can enter after August 15th, Lynn. It's just that the follow-up data is going to be, if you didn't do it during this next month and a half, you will have to get your TAP permission to, or you'll go in with your TAP and they'll have to clear it for you.
Yeah.
So that's why we really want you to get it done now before August 15th.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your questions, your good feedback. I'm hoping you can go forth, enter data. We will do our best to have everybody up and running by the end of the month. Shoot some emails, ask us questions, and we will respond as we're able to over the next couple of days here.
And just one more reminder to watch for an email from me, Michelle Markle, as an evaluation for this whole series. We just really value your feedback on how we did, what's still needed, what we can adjust. So please take the time, about 2 to 5 minutes tops, to fill that out and get that back to us. And that'll come out by the end of the day tomorrow, if not today.
One last question from Lynn Carter saying, can they enter after August 15th?
You can always enter data. Enter your data when you enroll your kids and then follow up with them when data points change. The best practice advice that I can give is to check it daily. I know most people won't do that. The next best practice advice I can give would be to carve out a special chunk of time every week where you sit down with your system and turn it on for 15 minutes and look at stuff to say, hey, does this person need an update? And then eventually you'll get into that flow and the email reminder system will be there to say, hey, go ahead and do this. Looks like Joshua, you wrote on there, hey, I like the reminder, great idea. So we're hoping we can get that feature going. It's there, it's designed to work, but 6 months has not passed yet, so I haven't been able to test the future of it. But I trust that it's there given our programmers, and if it's not, they will tweak and modify and make sure it occurs. So thank you everybody for your time. I'm going to end the meeting for all, and then you're free to go and enter data, and we'll be in touch. It was great spending Summer Academy with you. Thanks.
Bye.